The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the sleepy riverside town, its heat shimmering off the cobblestone streets and pressing down on empty lanes where even the cicadas had grown weary of their own song. In a forgotten alley between two abandoned warehouses, broken crates and scattered trash lay in heaps. It was here that a tiny figure stirred, barely noticeable, yet burning with stubborn will. Buddy, a 2-month-old puppy with pale yellow fur matted and dull, nosed restlessly at a black plastic bag. His ribs showed through his thin body, each breath a tremor. Hunger gnawed at him, but what caught his attention was not food. From inside the bag came a faint, fractured sound. At first it was a whimper, so fragile it seemed like the echo of the wind. Then it became clear, a meow, weak and broken, slipping through the suffocating plastic. Buddy froze. His ears twitched, his heart racing. He pawed at the bag desperately. Something was alive inside, something even smaller and weaker than himself. With his tiny teeth, Buddy bit into a corner of the bag and pulled. The plastic resisted, heavy with the weight inside. His claws scraped against the stones as he dragged inch by inch. The bag snagged on broken wood, tore slightly against sharp gravel, yet he refused to let go. His small body trembled with exhaustion, but still he tugged, whining in soft, desperate cries, as though calling out to anyone who would listen. By the time he pulled the bag to the mouth of the alley, the sun had shifted, casting long shadows on the deserted street. Ahead, a solitary figure walked slowly, leaning on a cane. Mrs. Grace, her back bent under years of solitude, carried a half-empty basket from the market.
Ow.
Her gray shawl clung to her thin shoulders. Most days, the town hardly noticed her presence. Buddy staggered forward, blocking her path. Then, in a gesture far beyond his strength and age, he rose onto his hind legs. Trembling violently, he pressed his 2 front paws together in an awkward prayer. His dark eyes gleamed with a plea more urgent than words. Mrs. Grace gasped, startled. Oh heavens, what on earth? At first, she thought the puppy was begging for food. But then her gaze fell on the bag behind him, twitching faintly. She dropped her basket, knelt down, and with trembling fingers tore the knot open. Inside lay a kitten, no older than a month. Its fur was damp, its tiny body limp, breath shallow and fading. Mrs. Grace's heart clenched. "Oh, you poor little soul," she whispered, lifting the kitten gently. Buddy barked once, an anxious, sharp sound, then pressed close, licking at the kitten's face, as if urging it to hold on. Mrs. Grace gathered both creatures in her arms. Her house was small, dim, and often unbearably quiet, but in that moment she knew she couldn't leave them behind. Back in her home at the edge of town, Mrs. Grace warmed some milk. She searched her cupboards, found an old medicine dropper, and tried to feed the kitten. But Lunacy named her on impulse, for her pale, moon-like fur refused to swallow. Her tiny head turned weakly aside. Her dull eyes half closed, as if surrendering. Mrs. Grace's chest tightened with despair. "No, little one, don't give up." Then something remarkable happened. Buddy climbed onto the blanket where Luna lay. He pressed his frail body against hers, licking her ears, nuzzling her chest. His warmth, his persistence, his fragile but unyielding love seemed to coax her back. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Luna opened her mouth and accepted a drop of milk. Then another. Mrs. Grace covered her lips with her hand, tears welling. "You're the reason she's still fighting," she whispered to Buddy. From that day forward, the puppy and the kitten were inseparable. Luna would not drink unless Buddy was by her side. She would not sleep unless curled against his chest. Buddy guarded her constantly, his eyes never straying far. For the first time in years, Mrs. Grace's house was filled with sound, not of loneliness, but of life. The faint purring of Luna, the playful yips of Buddy, the shuffle of tiny paws across her floorboards. It didn't take long for the story to slip through the cracks of the quiet town. Neighbors whispered of an old widow whose stray puppy had dragged a bag through the streets, begging like a human to save a kitten. Children begged their parents to visit. Adults who had once passed Mrs. Grace without a second glance now knocked on her door. They brought food, blankets, toys, even medicine for the animals. Mrs. Grace, once invisible, found her porch lively with visitors. She was shy at first, unused to the company. But as she told the tale how Buddy stood on trembling legs, paws pressed together, she saw wonder in their eyes. For the first time in many seasons, she felt truly seen. Weeks passed. Luna grew stronger. Her once dull eyes now shone like stars, chasing after Buddy in clumsy leaps across the garden. Buddy himself filled out, his ribs no longer stark beneath his fur. His coat grew soft, his bark confident. Mrs. Grace often sat on her porch, Kane beside her, watching them play in the sun. Sometimes her thoughts drifted back to her husband, gone many years, and the children who had long since moved away. She had thought her days of love and family were finished, yet here they were, two fragile lives who had chosen her. "They saved me as much as I saved them," she often murmured. Buddy was still protective. If Luna strayed too far, he barked sharply until she returned. If strangers approached too quickly, he stood before her, small but fierce. And Luna, though playful and free, always nestled against him at night, as though remembering that first desperate rescue. The miracle of Buddy and Luna rippled through the community. People began to treat strays differently, leaving bowls of water outside, bits of food by the roadside. Some even adopted abandoned animals. Children drew pictures of Buddy standing on two legs, paws pressed like a prayer, and their parents pinned them in shop windows. Mrs. Grace found herself at the center of a quiet transformation. Where once her loneliness had gone unnoticed, now she was greeted warmly wherever she went. The town, touched by the bond of two tiny creatures, rediscovered its own compassion. One golden afternoon, Mrs. Grace sat on her porch, watching Buddy and Luna chase butterflies in the garden. Her lips curved into a smile she hadn't worn in years. The neighbors called it a miracle. A starving puppy too young to fend for himself had refused to abandon another life, dragging salvation into the path of the only person who could help. But to Mrs. Grace, it was something simpler. It was love, the kind that arrives quietly, unexpectedly, and turns an empty house into a home again. She reached out, her weathered hands trembling slightly, as Buddy bounded into her lap and Luna curled against her arm. Tears blurred her vision, but her heart was full. "Thank you," she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to life itself, for sending her this small, extraordinary blessing.